this is another big issue in macroeconomics, okay? So even if you are very, very sort of mastering the workhorse model, so let's say you really know A to Z, and you can solve any issues in the workhorse model, when you try to apply in a real situation, unfortunately, even the best workhorse model may not work, may not apply exactly like what it is in the real world. Okay? Why? Because of this, because of uncertainty. Because workhorse model, like any model, you know what is model, right? Model is a simplification of reality, basically. So, like any models, workhorse model in macroeconomics implies there is certain degree of certainty. And yet, the real world is full of uncertainty. Okay? And that is the reasons why it is always advised to to macroeconomic policymakers to be more careful in adopting a particular policy based on the model. So it is important to know about the model. That's why you're taking economics. That's why you're taking course of macroeconomics, because it's very important for you to understand the theory and how that leads to policies. But given the uncertainty, you better be not too confident with your policy, in the sense that you have to take into account what if your policy doesn't work, okay? Because remember, in economics, including in macroeconomics, there is no one single policy that is not having negative effect. Any policy will also have a negative effect, okay? So, precisely because there is an uncertainty, then the policy that you take may not achieve the target, but at the same time, it achieves the negative effect. So what's the point of taking that policy if that is the case, right? Now, this is the reasons why I give an example here. I don't know if you know Robert Solow is a Nobel Prize winner in economics, okay? He's with MIT, and he once wrote that if you don't know what you are doing, for heaven's sake, do it gently. So this is basically a message by a Nobel laureate to macroeconomic policymakers, whether it's Minister of Finance or Central Bank. Do it gently, because there is no certainty in what you are taking. That's essentially the message there. Okay? The second is expectation. Because remember the game that I was telling you earlier between A and B. A is the policymakers, B is the society. No matter what your model tells you, and that's why you take a certain policy, you're hoping that B will react a certain way. I give you an example earlier. If you lower the interest rate, you expect that the investor will start to invest, borrow money and then invest, right? But maybe the investors have different expectations. And because they have different expectations, they do not behave according to what the policymakers think that they will behave. So expectation also matters. The question is, how do we know about expectation? Well, I'm sorry to say, we economists are very poor in trying to understand expectation. So we have to learn from sociologists or from psychologists, and because they are the one who knows better about the expectation of human being. Remember, even though we are talking about investor or consumers, we are still talking about human being. Kita masih bicara tentang manusia. So the behavior of that manusia, economists are very poor in understanding it, and that's why we have to collaborate. We have to work together with sociologists, with psychologists, and so on. Now, the last point is very important. Okay? All macroeconomic models that you will learn in this class, the workhorse model at least, okay, are based on a certain assumption about rationality of the economic agent, whether it's consumers, exporters, importers, savers, or household. Okay, it doesn't matter what agents you're talking about. Macroeconomic models always assume that they are rational human beings. Now, rational can be defined in many different ways depending on who you are. If you are, let's say, firms or business people, rationality means the higher the profit is, the better. Okay? If you are consumers, rational means the more you get the same good with the lowest price is the better. So things like that. Okay. Now, all this rationality assumption is really behind all the macroeconomic models. Then you should ask yourself the question, in reality, are all those people, whether it's consumer, take yourself for example, are you really rational? Whenever you try to buy some certain things, is it really that you want to have the lowest price? What about the quality? What about, let's say, after-sale service? What about, you know, the service of the sellers of that good that you're buying from and so on? It's much more complex. You know, your decision to buy or not to buy, unfortunately, is not only determined by the price. Okay, so this is what they call the bounded rationality, not the full rationality. Okay, unfortunately, most of the macroeconomic models are based on the assumptions of rationality, not bounded rationality. Okay. Now, how do we know? Let's say in this class, I don't know how many people did in the class. How big is the class? Jana or Fauzi? Can you tell me how many of them?
I think 16. 16. Someone. Where's the mic?
Hello, tester. 16, sir.
Yes.
16.
15. Okay. Let's say, 16. Okay. Let's say among 16 people here. Okay. Individual number 1 until individual number 16. Okay. Let's say individual number 1 is more or less rational, 90% rational. But individual number 6 may be only 20% rational. Individual number 7 may be 50% rational, and so on. So that means the degree of rationality is not only not perfect, not 100%, but also it varies between individuals, right? Even among 15 people in this class. Okay? And that is because even among 16, even you have the same sort of predicate. The predicates of you all are student of FEB UI, right? The same. But even with the same predicate like FEB UI students like you, or even you can say FEB UI student who is taking macroeconomics 1. So that's the same predicate. But each of you are very different, right? In terms of your behavior. Why? Because you are not the same, and that's why they call it heterogeneous agents. Okay? So, unfortunately, again, this is all sort of points indicating that you have to be very careful. Even after you learn all the macroeconomic models, you have to be careful in trying to adopt that model. Why? Because in reality, society are heterogeneous. They call it heterogeneous agents. Okay? So, one policy may be good for individual number 1 to number 6, but very bad for individual number 10 to number 16. Okay? So that is what it meant by the heterogeneous agent. So all this uncertainty is really giving you caution about how to conduct the macroeconomic policies.